Okay, this is part two. It's called breaking the manuscript. So once you've gotten your outline all figured out, and don't skimp on that outline. So once you got the outline all figured out, the next part is really kind of fun. It's the dialogue, it's the actual storytelling, it's the setting of the scene. I wrote mine like a regular book where I would just, character walks into the room, says something to the other character, character B gets angry and leaves the room, blah blah blah. Other people like to write it kind of like a movie script, where it's like, if you've ever seen a movie script, it has the name of the character, their dialogue, the name of the next character, their dialogue. It's kind of like a play. And then you have a descriptor of action or the interior or all that kind of stuff. Any of those will work when you're doing this. It's just whatever your preference is. I didn't have the program that does the manuscript thing, so I just wrote it like a regular story. So anyway, once you start doing this manuscript, the interesting part that will happen is you'll start finding wrinkles in your story. You'll start finding interesting moments that you didn't think were going to be there. So as I was writing this story, I was um, going back and forth with my editor, and she was asking questions, and she was saying, "Well, why do you go by Peter if your name is Pedro?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's a good point." And she's like, "You might need to cover that in the book." And so as I started trying to cover that in the book, I realized, like, oh, this is actually what the book is about. It's about me and my identity as a Mexican and an American. So it changed the book as I was writing the book. And then it'll happen again. Like later on, when you get to the illustration part of this adventure, you're going to notice that, oh, I don't need to say any of this, and I'll get into that. But it's really kind of fun and fascinating and kind of frustrating for the editor. I enjoyed it. I don't know what she felt, but I enjoyed it. Um, so I'll show you some examples of what it looks like and what you can do with it. Okay. One of the interesting things you're going to find when you start writing this stuff out, especially when you start breaking these things apart, you're going to start finding these things called page turns. And when you hear that term, it's a real page turner, especially in comic books. What you, the author, illustrator, are going to want to do is when you get to that bottom right corner of your page, which I'm kind of getting ahead of the game here, but when you get to some place where there's something about dramatic about to happen, that's when you want to make your page turn, right? So that whoever's reading this is going to be like, oh, what's going to happen next? I got to see. And they're going to flip the page. So that's called a page turner. And in comic books, it's a very powerful tool. Comic books, graphic novels, any other kind of book. It's just a really a really great tool. So as you're writing and figuring your story out, you're going to start noticing, like, ooh, here's a really dramatic moment that I think could be a page turner. Let me move some stuff around to make sure that this is either the last moment of my chapter so that they want to get to the next chapter, or it's not that big, but it's really interesting and it's going to make somebody want to turn the page. Okay, this is part 2B. I've suddenly splintered off into a B portion of the show. Part 2B. Okay, so once your story's written and you have all your dialogue, what I did was I created a document that had all this information on there, all the words and everything. And I went through page by page, and I'll show you an example up here on the screen. And I would highlight and copy chunks of dialogue, and I would transfer them to a blank Illustrator page or a blank Photoshop page. This is where the artwork kind of starts to come in. And the reason I do that is because I want to see what I can fit on a spread, an art spread. So, like, for example, like, here's a lot of dialogue in here, and I'm notorious for writing a lot of dialogue. So um, these chunks, these dialogue balloons, kind of set the tone for what the page is going to look like. So I need to see what that's going to look like before I can draw my pictures, right? Sometimes there's not a lot said in a spread, which is great, and then that gives me a lot of room to draw and to kind of have fun. But as you're looking at your story and you're like, oh, this copy all has to happen at the same time because it's very important. I'm going to just isolate this on the page and then kind of look at it and to see if it all fits there. And if it doesn't fit there, what can I get rid of? What can I edit? Um, which is also super important. And you'll figure this out on the next step, is that sometimes the things you think are important are not important. And you won't know it until you put the whole thing together and look at it and we're like, does this make any sense?